Hello. Welcome to At Home in Dublin with Ricky Porter. This is a special television program sponsored by TV35 for the purpose of showing the best of Dublin. We believe that Dublin is an attractive community to live in and a wonderful place to raise your children and family. It's also a magnificent place to grow up spiritually. I've been in Dublin since 2007, and I have found the people here to be absolutely lovely in every regard. This television program features those we regard as movers and shakers, pioneers, that will show you just how great our city is. Today I have a guest that you will be completely impressed by. I have been. You'll know more about him and his family. This is a two-part interview. This first part will deal exclusively about the business aspects of his family. It will talk a great deal about artifacts, pictures, and other kinds of articles related to their business. And later, we will do a second part that will deal more with the genealogical or family lineage of this family. Mr. Carl Pearson.
How are you, sir?
I'm good. Welcome to At Home in Dublin with Ricky Porter.
Thank you very much.
I'm really glad to have you here. I've known your family since I've been here, and I've met you most recently. And so I'm very, very glad to have you here on the show. It's a very relaxed atmosphere, and as we move along, I think you'll enjoy it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But I'd like to give you an opportunity to say hello directly to our TV audience, and then we'll begin our conversation. So speak to our people.
Okay. Well, again, I am Carl Pearson, and I'm really glad to be here. And Dr. Porter has always done a lot of great things, and I'm just, again, glad to have the opportunity to present on the show and add to what he's adding to our community.
Thank you very much. I have organized this interview in two parts. This first part will look at your family business. And we're going to look at your family business as an important aspect of African American history. Now, in this regard, it'll be African American history in Lawrence County, Dublin, the city. But we know that a thriving African American business goes beyond being African American.
Yes.
It's a national and it is an American phenomenon, and we're going to look at it from those kinds of perspectives too.
Yes.
And then later, at another time, we'll look more at your family, the genealogy, the lineage of those who kept the business going. We're going to start with the 1920s. This check, C.D. Dudley and Son, Undertakers and Embalmers. A check from the 1920s.
Yes, it is.
I assume that it was this check, this money, that made it possible to start the business?
Yes. That check actually represents the start of what is now the Dudley Funeral Home. The family started that business as the probably third business that they had in Dublin, Georgia, in 1922.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And after the business got started, things developed. I'm sure there were rocky roads along the way. Have your family told you any stories about that? In other words, were there any problems as a result of the fact that they were black? In other words, did they have... First National was obviously a white bank.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's actually the First National Bank was what we call the skyscraper in Dublin downtown. That was the First National Bank at that time. And so financing was different in those days for people of color. Mm-hmm. And the money would have to come not through the traditional banks, but through other people who had businesses. And so there was a cadre, if you will, of other businesses in the area, like Herschel Lovett, that would support the businesses that Herbert Dudley ran. They were actually very good friends.
So, what I hope I mentioned your name,
Yes.
Carl Pearson.
Yes.
Okay, right. So what I'm hearing is you had white benefactors like Mr. Lovett who supported African Americans who were going into business, such as your great-grandparents.
Yes. Yes. So there were obviously sources of revenue and sources of employees for Mr. Lovett's business, and so there was an even exchange, if you will, even during those times, where they would go back and forth in terms of getting people employable for different jobs and for keeping people employed to work on Mr. Lovett's farms, and then when those times were down, then people would come and work for Mr. Dudley and some of his businesses.
And do you know of other black businesses that were in existence at the time of when the Dudley Enterprises businesses began?
But back in the 1920s, we don't have many records of what those businesses are. I don't have them, I should say. But of course, there are people who've documented some of the earlier businesses during that time. What we have documented as part of our history are some of the other local merchants. There was a dry goods store that was downtown, but there was a dry goods store in almost every section or community of the city at that time that catered to the local neighborhoods. And so right down the street where the Thomases had a store there on Gaines Street. Of course, the Mays had a store. This is later than 1920, but
Correct.
in the going up through the 30s, 40s, 50s, when the black businesses were thriving as community establishments. And so they all worked together, and they worked in the smaller communities in order to make sure that there was produce, food, and financing for those things, because people would get paid once a week, once a month, and so you would have to carry all of those people, and so everybody had local accounts.
Well, Scott Thompson, whom I've interviewed twice, will be able to be helpful regarding the history of black-owned businesses in Dublin.
Right.
So we know that there were other black businesses when your family began their business. But my question would be, and I'm not asking that you will answer this, but my question would be, are there any original black businesses or earlier black businesses that began when your family started their business that is still around today?
Not that I know of.
Okay. So your family and your family's businesses, they have survived.
Right.
That is important. And even more importantly, your family has survived.
Right.
And that is significant. So as I mentioned before, at another time, we'd like to talk more about your family. But now, we're simply talking with Carl Pearson, related to Dudley Enterprises, for African American History Month, and we're talking exclusively regarding their businesses. And in a later time, as we mentioned before, we'll talk more about their family. But I do want to begin a little conversation now about your family, because what I understand, and you can help me out, is that your grandparents, representing the 30s, your grandparents representing the 30s would have been Herbert Dudley and Katie Dudley.
Herbert and Mamie.
Herbert and Mamie. Okay. So where does the name Katie come from?
So Katie is actually Herbert's mother.
Oh, I understand. So Herbert is the son of Katie Dudley.
Katie and Clayton Dudley.
I understand.
Yes.
So Katie and Clayton Dudley are the original.
Yes.
I understand that. And so this check from the 1920s represents that original family, Katie and Clayton.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
And then their son, Herbert, along with his wife, Mamie,
Yes.
continued with the business. And I want you, even though we're going to have an opportunity later to talk more about your family, but I've seen the picture, which you will see later, of Herbert Dudley, and he was dapper,
Yes.
suave,
Yes.
sophisticated,
Yes.
educated,
Yes.
self-confident,
Yes.
ambitious,
Yes.
good-looking.
Yes. All of those things. He was quite a sensation, and a lot of people knew him not only in the local community, but in the statewide and on a national basis. He participated in a lot of church activities, including the AME Church on a national basis, and also he participated with the National Funeral Directors Association for Blacks. It's currently called the National Funeral Directors and Morticians Association, from the genesis of the funeral home in the 1920s.
So, Herbert Dudley would be your grandfather?
He would be actually technically my great uncle.
Your great uncle, okay. And we'll talk more about family connections later.
Yes.
But you seem to speak of him admirably.
Yes.
Tell me more about that. I mean, did you know him personally?
I was actually 2 years old when he passed away. But if being in the business and being around people that work for him, I've had the last 50 years of stories about him and how he ran the business and how he supported his community, not only in terms of employing people, but as we talked about before, in terms of getting people into school. He supported all of the historically black schools and was on the board of trustees for Morris Brown through the AME Church. So all of those people have wonderful things to say about him, and it's not hard to find someone that he touched here in the community still.
So when we talk about the religious aspect of your family, it's almost impossible to talk about the businesses and not talk about the family.
Right.
But we will have another time to talk more intimately or more intricately regarding the family. But AME, which I know very well because my mother was reared AME, but for the sake of those who are watching our television program, we want to say that AME stands for African Methodist Episcopal, and that in itself is another show altogether.
Yes.
Richard Allen, but we're mentioning it now because of African American History Month. Richard Allen, the founder of the AME Church, and your family has been a part of that movement and that mission. I'd like to say a little bit more regarding Herbert Dudley and Mamie Dudley, but in connection with the mother, Katie Dudley.
Yes.
Because that name stands out in Dublin because of the public housing establishment that is named after her. And is it called the Katie Dudley Village?
That is correct. Katie Dudley Village on Washington Street, across from what everybody remembers as Washington Street School. And Katie was an educator herself. So because she was all about getting people into school and away from the farms when that was in conflict, she was recognized for that with that public housing
Establishment.
So,
Katie Dudley is on the south side.
yes.
Okay. And Johnson Homes is on the south side. I know for a fact both are because I do a great deal of community work in that area. But you're being very helpful in terms of attaching history with the names. And we also know of Vincent Village. These are all public housing community. But you're telling me that the very first African-American public housing community was named after Katie Dudley.
That is correct.
Wow, that is major. So for African American History Month, we celebrate in Dudley a major figure like Katie Dudley. That's very important.
Yes.
And it's something that we need to be able to teach to the generations that are growing up in Dublin.
Yes.
That Katie Dudley is not just a name, but it is a person who thrived for the betterment of the black community.
Yes.
And there's no better time, such as Black History Month, to talk about the appreciation we have for our black historical figures. And I'm really, really glad to have you on the show. I've been trying forever to get you on the show. But your family has a certain kind of modesty and humility that I respect. But I'm glad you finally melted down and you're on the show. I'd like to move on and talk a little bit regarding the present generation. Now, what we have as the present generation, which would be the 60s, and by present generation, we're talking about you.
Yes.
And we're talking about your brother, Alfred.
Correct.
And we're also talking about your oldest sister.
Yes, Ojeda.
Ojeda.
Yes.
But she's not in the family business, is she?
She is actually the bookkeeper and the financial officer for all of the businesses. Mm-hmm. So she works in the background.
Okay. And then your younger sister?
Herberta. Yes. And she is actually our CIO. She's our Chief Information Officer, and she runs all the computers. And she's also a physician at the VA.
Wow. And where did she get her medical degree?
She was at the Medical College of Georgia. But all the girls went to Spelman undergrad.
Okay. Now, this is what I like to do. I like to bring myself up to date on what we've covered so far, and this will help our TV audience as well. What I understand is that Dudley businesses began in the 20s, and it still exists today.
That is correct.
Okay. And the original persons who began the Dudley businesses produced a generation, and from that generation we have Herbert Dudley, correct?
Correct.
And his wife Mamie.
Right.
Correct. And then they produced a generation that brought you about. And I want to talk a little bit about your mother.
Yes.
And give me your mother's name.
So Mom is Thomasina Walker.
Mm-hmm.
And she married my father, Alfred Pearson, and so she became what most people call her is Tommy. Mm-hmm. And, of course, she passed away in June.
Yes. You have my condolences.
Thank you. But she, after Herbert, as being the life of the family, if you will, became the second person with a quite an illustrious reputation.
When we talk about your family, when we do the show regarding the family lineage, it might be helpful if we could do, and we can sit down together and do it, and write like out a family tree with little lines going. And we'll talk more about the family. But this is a great picture of the family, though. And as I mentioned, TV 35 will be able to show you this artifact much more clearly. But right now I'm just discussing with Carl Pearson regarding this wonderful artifact, which is archival in the sense that it is not only simply history, it is not simply something of the past, but it is an historical past that has meaning for this present moment.
Yes.
So to see this picture of your older sister, and her name again is?
Ojeda.
And then the picture of the second child, your brother Carl. Alfred. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you.
Yes.
And then your younger sister.
Yes.
And your younger sister's name?
Herberta.
And all of you are a part of the business as well as having your own professional careers as well.
Yes.
That's magnificent. Well, we're going to move on. And you got through the 60s, which is when you were a child of the 60s.
Yes.
For African American History Month, we know that has been a turbulent decades for African Americans, wherever you lived in the United States. But your family has survived it.
Yes.
And it seems to me that you survived it in what we call good stead, meaning that you've gotten stronger and the business has gotten to be even more thriving in many ways. But as we move on to the 70s, we're going to show to our TV audience another archival piece, and you will get a chance to see it more clearly. But right now I'm speaking with Carl Pearson of Dudley Enterprises regarding it. Let's talk about this picture that our TV audience will see more of later. That's an interesting kind of picture. They're standing in front of the funeral home?
Yes.
And this is your father?
Yes.
And your father's full name?
Alfred Pearson.
Alfred Pearson Sr. And he's not from Dublin.
No, Dad is originally from Glenwood, Georgia.
Okay. And we will have a lot of substance when we get a chance to talk about the family. Now, this is your brother, Alfred.
Yes.
Who's staring into the camera as if the sun was just beaming on him.
Yes.
And this is you looking like a soldier. Have you ever had a military career?
No, I haven't. That was just the way that I looked in the 70s when I had more hair.
When you had more hair. Okay. And your father, this is your mother.
Yes.
Thomasina?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Now, that was a name I've got to know since I've been in Dublin.
Yes.
And there was a family business that was named after your mother.
That's correct.
Could you tell me a little bit about that business?
So when Mom was born in 1934, the beauty and barbershop was renamed to reflect her name. And so it became Thomasina's Beauty and Barbershop. And the name is French, and they actually reflected that in the name, and that the name of the business is always sort of pronounced with a little bit of French intonation, if you will. But again, she recently passed away, but the business is going on in her name.
Now, so your mother's name is Thomasina?
Thomasinor.
Thomasinor. So that's where the French accent come in.
That's correct.
Thomasinor.
Yes.
Now, is there some kind of story behind that in terms of whether or not your grandparents or parents took French as a second language?
Her mother was into European influence, and she also named my older sister Ojeda.
And is that also French heritage?
It's European.
European.
But it's not French.
Right.
But so that's where the name came from.
I guess I'm going to brag for a little bit. I took French as a second language. And I lived in a bilingual country as a part of my internship in Africa, Cameroon, West Africa. Yes. Cameroon is a bilingual country, French and German. And I lived in the English sector of the country for a year. So, but I had not recognized your mother's name as French. I had recognized it as Spanish, but it's the pronunciation that makes it very clearly French. Could you say the name again?
Thomasinor.
Thomasinor.
Yes.
And there's a nickname for her, isn't it?
Tommy. Most people know her as Tommy.
Is that right?
Yes.
Just by going by the name, I would say that your mother was casual and easygoing.
Yes.
Was she?
Very.
Really?
Very, yes. And she enjoyed talking, as everyone will attest to. And you have to book at least a couple of hours in order to partake, because Mama's going to feed you, and you're going to talk. So that's her trademark.
But Carl, the way you're describing your mother and the way we're talking about your family business, it seems absolutely apropos for African American History Month. Because if there's anything that is black about who we are, it's about inviting someone in the kitchen for a meal and getting caught up on what's going on.
Yes.
So we would say your mother was quintessentially an African American woman.
She was. And she enjoyed a lot of things that were exclusively African American. Spelman College, she and all of her classmates from Spelman College kept in touch right up until the last moment. And she also went to a school for girls that was exclusively African American in South Carolina.
And what was the name of that school?
The Mather School in Busey, South Carolina.
And does the Mathers School still exist?
The Alumni Association still exists. The school exists under a different name at this point, but they do have the property in Beaufort, South Carolina, and they convene annually.
Wow. There's no way in the world that we can cover about your family's businesses or your family's genealogy in one show, but we're doing the best we can. Mm-hmm. Let's move to the current modern or post-modern era. And we have an artifact that the TV audience will see more clearly. But for now, you and I are looking towards it. And it has your father on there, and your father's on the far right.
Correct.
And the woman in the middle, who is she?
So we have two other employees there who are, long-term, as most of the Dudley Funeral Home family is, long-term, very dedicated people who treat their association with the funeral home as a vocation, if you will. And so in the center of the picture is Deborah Newkirk, and on the left is Reggie Howard.
And both are long-term employees.
Yes.
Now tell me about the vehicles that they're standing in front of. The one that they're directly in front of, what kind of car is that?
The first car there is a Lincoln MKS.
I think I might have rode in that car, and I felt like a very well-to-do man when I rode in that car. And then next to that car is the actual hearse.
Yes, sir. And that's, of course, a Cadillac DTS. And we have a fleet of Lincolns and a fleet of Cadillacs that are sometimes used together and sometimes used separately.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking to Carl Pearson from the Dudley family and celebrating their legacy in Dublin, Lawrence County, but celebrating their legacy in American history. They happen to have been African Americans, but more importantly, they were Americans. Americans who understood that great enterprise of capitalism and did their best to make it work very well. Mr. Pearson, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, sir.
We look forward to a follow-up show that will deal more with the genealogy and the family lineage. But before we go, I'd like to give you another opportunity during this month of African American history to say something directly to our TV audience.
As Dr. Porter has mentioned, it is African American History Month, and we invite everybody here to take advantage of that. There's tons of history here. There's history on the city level, the national level. Please participate. Please find out more about what's going on. There's always something more to be learned. And as he pointed out, these learnings can be turned into opportunities. So please do participate and share in what's going on for African American History Month.
It has been a real pleasure. Please greet your brother, Alfred, for me.
I will.
And greet your father. Believe it or not, your father and I used to work out together at Fairview Hospital.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Great.
He was a better, consistent person than I was. Thank you, Carl, very much.
Thank you, Dr. Porter.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us at home in Dublin with Ricky Porter.